Welcome to another episode of Erik Whiskey Studies, and this is my final episode on the business of Scotch whiskey. My next series will be my videos of my trip to Scotland in July 2019, and I'll be sharing photos and video as well as the whiskeys that I brought back from Scotland, and this is one of them. This is one that I brought back from Springbank Distillery. This is a distillery exclusive Springbank, aged 8 years, and it's cask strength at 56.8% alcohol by volume. It was distilled in March 2011, released on the 23rd of May 2019. And the cask type, it says, fresh sherry cask, only 1,100 bottles. They had 2 or 3 distillery-only exclusives. This was one of them, so this was the one I brought back because it seemed the most interesting out of all of them, and the cask strength. So the 2 major things we want to look at in this video is we're looking at the future of the Scotch whiskey industry, particularly the current rolling out of the new distilleries and planned. Some have already been built, some are new, and some are yet forthcoming. So sort of a work in progress. There's a lot going on. There's like 20 new distilleries popping up in Scotland. And other distilleries are expanding, ones that are already in existence. They're increasing their production. So the Scotch whiskey industry is really booming right now. At present, there are almost 20 new distilleries, either in the planning phase or under construction across Scotland. Ardgowan Distillery in Glasgow, Ardross Distillery at Alness, Barra Distillery on the Isle of Barra, Clydeside Distillery in Glasgow, Drimmen Estate in the Highlands, Dunrobin Castle Distillery at Dunrobin, Sutherland, Falkirk Distillery at the Helix in Falkirk, Tulvaddy Distillery near Tain, Holyrood Distillery at St. Leonard's in Edinburgh, Huntly Distillery at Huntly, Aberdeenshire, Mossburn Distillery in Jedburgh Borders, Shetland Distillery at Saxa Vorden on Shetland. Other planned distilleries include Ravers Distillery in Jedburgh Borders, Loch Erriboll in the Sutherland, and Walkerburn at Innerleithen Borders. We are currently seeing expansions at 3 of the biggest distilleries, the Macallan, the Glenlivet, and Glenfiddich, which effectively will mean 3 new distilleries with a huge capacity. A number of new distilleries are opening with capacities ranging from 30,000 liters to well over 2 million liters. How the market will cope with this sharp increase in capacity in the next 5 to 10 years will be very interesting to see, and there will likely be some failures along the way. For the present, though, demand remains strong and there is a huge appetite for investing in whiskey from both seasoned industry veterans and newcomers alike. So I'm not going to give it a full review because this is just a neck pour. I want to get a couple glasses out of this before I do my formal video. Give some time to open up. Wow, but man, this is just unbelievable on the nose. And look at the color on that, just really, really dark. There's no added coloring. Although Scotch whiskey, they can add coloring. There's no added coloring to this. Wow. Really, really intense fig, dates, raisins. Sort of a Christmas cake, fruit, nut cake. So I've got very intense sherry notes. Some vanilla, caramels, dark brown chocolate. A lot of spice, cinnamon. Maybe a little bit of pepper. Baking spices. There's also a dark earth and charred wood character to it. Wow, really, really awesome. So as I continue to smell this, and I'll give you my tasting notes in just a minute as I continue to smell this. The next thing we want to look at are developments against potential threats in the Scotch whiskey industry in the marketplace. The Scotch whiskey industry is a profoundly traditional industry with clearly defined rules and regulations. This has potentially led the industry to be susceptible to threats from other competitors. Some critics have argued that the whiskey industry has rested on its laurels for too long. It has taken the whiskey industry some time to realize that it needs to attract the new millennial audience of younger drinkers in order to have a sustainable future. The typical grandfather or father image of whiskey drinkers needs to be shaken off. So don't ever want to judge a whiskey based on a neck pour, but this is already showing really nice. Very, very intense and concentrated flavors. Super long finish. I'm still tasting it now. On the palate, the nose is confirmed. This is a very intensely, heavily sherried whiskey. It has sort of like chocolate-covered cherry notes, but it also has a savory character to it. Almost like sort of like the ends of a barbecue tri-tip. Have you ever put a spiced rub on a tri-tip? Use brown sugar and use pepper and all kinds of herbs and spices. And the ends of the tri-tip, they tend to be a little more fully cooked than in the middle. So you might get say medium rare in the middle. You get it closer to well done on the tips. But you also get a concentration of all the spices and so forth, and the brown sugars and the salt and all that on the ends of your tri-tip. I love doing tri-tip rubs. I kind of get that savory note on this as well. So one of the challenges that whiskey industries run into is shifts in demographics as to who the primary consumers are. I did a video on Japanese whiskey and why there has been a shortage in the Japanese whiskey. And one of the things I talked about was that there was a generation in which of Japanese consumers that looked at Japanese whiskey as their parents' drink, and so they weren't drinking it anymore. That consequently was consumption of Japanese whiskey plummeted. Consequently, they then closed some distilleries, and then later on, there was a big demand of Japanese whiskeys due to a movie that came out on the founder of the Japanese whiskey industry, as well as big write-ups in the Whiskey Bible. That's sort of it in a nutshell. All of a sudden, they had a shortage on Japanese whiskey. But the main point I was getting at is that particular generation wasn't being focused upon for marketing the Japanese whiskey. Consequently, they lost a consumer base. Well, now the millennials, I think I'm a Generation X, if I recall correctly, but I think that the millennials are now becoming more economically solvent, and they've got money to spend, and they're coming up economically, and they're sort of now a larger consumer base for whiskey, and the Scotch whiskey industry sort of needs to do some adjusting, at least part of their strategies, and how to reach the millennial generation so that they become the favored drink. Millennials are going to drink, whether it's beer or something else, might as well be fine Scotch whiskey. One of the things I found interesting in searching around on the issue of the millennials as being consumers, I actually found a really good clip from the CBS News organization. I wouldn't think that they would, particularly here in the United States, wouldn't it be addressing the issue of Scotch whiskey, but they did a really good issue or discussing the millennials and the consumption of whiskey. And it's quite surprising, because I never thought of Compass Box as being targeted towards millennials, but apparently what he's doing is sort of fitting the bill. So check it out.
It's last call for tonight. Jonathan Vigliotti tells us about a new wave of spirits made for millennials that's shaking up the whiskey business.
Its amber tones and smoky notes have seduced for centuries and given birth to one of the UK's most lucrative industries. In the rolling hills of Scotland, making Scotch whiskey is a work of art. The grains are mashed, fermented, then distilled, and finally aged in wooden casks. It's a 500-year-old spirit protected by law, and drinking it can pack a lot of rules. But in a small London loft, whiskey blender John Glaser is dropping the pretense and adding a new range of flavors.
A lot of people think Scotch whiskey is high-handed. They think there are rules. You have to drink it a certain way.
It is a little scary.
Yeah, it's frightening. There's so many different ones. There's so many different Scotch whiskeys, and how do I choose? And so it is intimidating. We try to break all that down.
Whisper whiskey, it's being dubbed, mellower and lighter for the millennial palate. The production process borrows from tradition.
About 20% back.
Glaser buys single malts from Scottish distilleries Like blenders of the past, he then mixes them. But he goes one step further, maturing the blend again in specially crafted casks that add more flavor.
When you're tasting, when you're assessing, some people might roll it around.
You can taste the vanilla.
It's a technique that's won the Michigan expat international praise and Scottish scorn. His innovative casks led to one of his whiskeys being banned by the Scotch Whisky Association, the industry's old guard. The association's Rosemary Gallagher laid down the law.
It has to be made in Scotland from water, yeast and cereals and has to mature for 3 years in oak casks. And that makes sure that people, when they buy Scotch whisky, know exactly what they're getting.
But in 2015, for the first time ever, not a single Scotch appeared in the prestigious Whiskey Bible's top 3 list. A Japanese whiskey ranked number 1. In 2016, Scotch was back on the list, but with a lighter caramel vanilla blend.
And if you're just doing things the way you always have, eventually you're going to kind of fall behind.
But where the old way meets the new wave, whiskey hopes to stay on top. Jonathan Vigliotti, CBS News, London.
Wow. Wow. Even in this short period of time, it's opening up really, really nice. I'm getting a lot of brown sugar notes along with the chocolate notes. And there's sort of a cream filled chocolate candy sort of coming up in the mid palate. Absolutely spectacular. Gonna want to get past the shoulder before I give a really total full review, but thus far it's looking really, really, really good. All right, so the next issue in terms of the future of Scotch whiskies in the marketplace is world whiskies, which they categorize as anything other than Scotch whiskies. I tend to think of world whiskies as there's old world and new world. Old world is the traditional whiskey producers. That would be primarily Scotland and Ireland. And then there's the rest of the world. But we're going to look at Irish whiskies as well. World whiskies, that is non-Scotch whiskies, are seeing considerable growth at the moment. It is anticipated that world whiskies will see 5% annual growth between 2015 and 2020, with sales of 363 million cases by 2020. American whiskey sales are expected to grow 4.4% annually to 2020. Irish whiskey has seen growth of 10.5% annually from 2008 to 2014, making it the fastest growing spirits category. That growth is expected to continue with annual volume growth forecast of 7.4% from 2016 to the year 2021 for the category. Single malt Scotch whiskey sales have increased to make up 28% of the volume of whiskey exported in early 2018, up from 18% in 2010. This move from blended whiskey to single malt whiskey needs much in the way of education in local markets to explain to consumers the differences between blends and single malts. However, there has been good progress in this area, and it is believed that there will be more growth in the emerging markets who may more easily switch from blended whiskey to single malt. Recognizing and promoting the prestige of a high-quality whiskey takes time to educate for some people, but it can also work with little to no education, as single malt whiskey has an aspirational status around the world, and new social media and web communications make the younger and aspirational drinker aware easily. Without trying to be too disruptive, the Scotch whisky industry has seen new releases with very accessible flavor profiles, as well as whiskeys with added flavors. However, there is a risk that with these new products, they could cannibalize their main portfolio brands purely for short-term gains. There have been rumors surrounding the idea that there is a shortage of Scotch whisky. However, at any one time, there are well over 20 million casks of whisky maturing in Scotland. It could be said that there is a spike in demand at the moment, which has led to the release of several non-age statement whiskies, but it is believed that in the near future there will be a return to age statements once again. The whiskey industry is a very long-term industry and needs to be cautious of jumping on current trends, as in 10 years' time, these trends will be old news. It is important for the industry to stay vigilant to creating high-quality products that have longevity for the greater good of the entire whiskey industry. In general, the Scotch whisky industry is in a very good position to see out long-term changes, and with technological improvements in efficiency along with competitive marketing strategies, there should be no concern for the whiskey industry long-term from current potential threats once the trade and political landscape clears. Wow. So this is pretty high ABV, and I'm going to try it again off camera, put it on with a little bit of water. But it's so intense now, it's doing really well. It doesn't seem like it needs water. It's so flavorsome now, so aromatic now. But I'm going to try it with a little bit of water, see how that affects it, and I'll try it on ice. Always like to cool it down a little bit, see how it comes across that way. But absolutely spectacular. So you are definitely going to want to check out my series of videos for Scotland 2019. I visited Scotland in June of 2018 and did a number of videos for 2018. Tried to go a little bit more academic for those videos. I'm not going to do that as much this time. Mostly going to be sort of sharing my journey around Scotland. Had an absolutely fantastic time. And I'm looking to go back in 2020 as well. So that's it for this series. If you subscribe to this channel, I want to thank you very much. If you haven't yet subscribed, but you like watching my videos, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up, with share with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and other social networking channels. And any comments, any feedback that you would have regarding this entire series. If there's a series or a range of topics you would really like to learn more about that isn't being covered by other whiskey tubers, perhaps it'll give me some ideas for other videos to do. I'm sort of have my plans mapped out, actually all the way until April 2020, and we're just approaching the end of September 2019. So I've got plenty of material there, but I'm looking for more academic areas to cover. Who knows, might do something on bourbon. Definitely want to do something on Ireland and on rye whiskeys and Canadian whiskeys in 2020. But I really like doing these more academic videos and series, and I think people seem to really enjoy them as well. All right, till next time, cheers and Slanjivat. Hey, if you like my review, be sure to check out these other whiskey videos.